However, when the Texans attacked, they discovered that the mules were carrying only grass to feed the Mexicans' hungry horses. Texans were about to give up when they heard encouraging news that Cuss's troops were in great confusion and low on supplies. 300 of the 500 men were ready to fight, and on December 5th they launched their attack. As many people were killed and wounded in the fight, raged on for 5 days.
The sledge of San Antonio dragged on, and the Texans' army began to drift away. Many of the men were farmers or ranchers who had work to do at home. Texans humiliated themselves at what became known as the grass fight. One of the Texas book looked at showed that Mexican soldiers were bringing miles and horses to San Antonio. The Texans suspected the miles were carrying silver, who caused madness to give to his soldier who paid them.
They struck the right side of the Mexican army, pushing the troops back into each other all around the line. The Texans shouted, "Remember the Alamo, the Goliad," as they crossed the battleground. Mexican leaders scrambled in confusion. The battle lasted about 18 minutes, but the Texans continued to capture the Mexican troops until dark. 2 Texans died, 30 wounded. 630 Mexican died, and 730 captured. Santa Anna escaped and hid in a barn. He got captured the next day and brought to Houston, who had been wounded in the fight.
Hi, I'm Carly.
And I'm Sam.
And I'm
Father Hidalgo tries to give independence to Mexico, but gets executed. Hidalgo tries to give independence to Mexico, but gets executed.
Mexico finally got their independence 10 years after he gave them new rights, new laws, and people of Spain were standing to rebel against their government. Mexico finally got their independence 10 years after, which gives them new rights and new laws.
I love Reggie.
People of Spain were starting to rebel against the government.
Hi, I'm Gibby, and today I'm going to talk to you about Field 300 with Sandy. Stephen of Boston needed 300 families to come to his colony. Stephen was accompanied by his vast troop who helped him get 3 families to his colony. They did. They did not want any families, felons or drunkards. They wanted clean, nice people. In the end, they ended up with 272 families going to Stephen's new colony.
I'm Carly, and today I'm talking about the Mexican colonists. Some colonists did not make sincere efforts to become loyal citizens of Mexico. They kept many of their own customs. They established their own schools and even started their own newspaper. Mexican government officials worried that the colonists were becoming too independent. Sam!
I'm Spencer, talking to you about the states' rights. Tensions arose over the balance of power between the state and national governments. With the United States, Mexico was organized into states. Mexico's Constitution of 1824 established a states' rights government, one in which most powers are given to the state government. Before this time, the federal government in Mexico City had held most of the power. Most settlers in Texas supplied the states' rights government because it also allowed more local control.
The Constitution of 1824 placed Provine of Texas in the Mexican state of Coahuila, with its capital at the city of Saltillo. Some leaders of the Mexican national government didn't approve of the states having so much power under the Constitution of 1824. They felt that the power should belong to the national government. The Mexican nationalists also were concerned that too many settlers from the United States were moving to Texas. They believed that a growing population from the U.S. and a strong state government might encourage the colonists to seize Texas and join the U.S. These fears led to increased hostilities.
Hi, I'm talking about the Convention of 1833. After the Convention of 1833, Stephen F. Austin traveled to Mexico City to deliver the Texans' resolutions to officials. When he reached Mexico in July, many challenges were attempted to be made by Valentin Gomez Fares. He was one of the first that Santa Anna allowed to run that government while he was away. A desires had swept through the city, killing thousands of people. Austin presented the resolutions to Gomez Fares. However, Gomez Fares was slow to address the Texans' problems, and Austin grew impatient. On October 1833, Austin wrote a letter to the Texans suggesting rape from the Cuchuala, but still a part of the Mexican Union. The next month, Austin met with Santa Anna, who agreed to most of the Texans' requests. He defeated the law prohibiting immigration to Texas. He accepted a good amount of laws, but rejected spectacle statehood for Texas.
This is Quattro talking to you about the law of April 6th. Go on, Quattro.
The law of April 6, 1830, in further efforts to control Texas, colonists, especially Anglo-Americans, Mexican officials passed the law of April 6, 1830. It outlawed immigration to the United States to Texas and canceled all impresarial grants that had not been fulfilled. As a result, settlers from the United States would no longer be allowed to colonize any Mexicans border state, including Texas. Oh, nobody can come in from either border of Texas. The law provided money and land for settlers. It also included other provisions designed to stay I can't read this handwriting.
No, you're gonna read it, Quattro.
It's been real. Quattro's out.
Austin had to fight his way back to Anahuac after he lowered the cannon onto the ship at Rosario, and his men sailed down the Brazos towards the Gulf of Mexico. When they reached Velasco, Mexican commander Velasco wouldn't let them pass. They fought in groups. For the first time, Mexicans and Texans shot each other. It resulted in casualties on both sides. The Texans and 5 Mexicans were killed. Mexicans surrendered because they were out of ammunition. Mexicans went back to Mexico and Texans continued on to Anahuac, and when they got there, the conflict had already been resolved.
I'm going to talk to you about the Convention of 1832 and 1833. 52 delegates met in San Felipe in October 1832 to draft a set of resolutions. The resolutions pledged support to the true Mexican government under the Constitution of 1824. The colonists also asked talking to you about the conventions of 1832 and 1833. 56 delegates met in San Felipe in October 1832 to draft a set of resolutions. The resolutions pledged support to the true Mexican government under the Constitution of 1824. The colonists also asked that the government allow immigration in the United States and exempt Texans from custom duties. After the meetings, Stephen F. Austin went to San Antonio to gain the support of the Tejano community there. Officials in San Antonio refused to send the Texans' request to officials in Mexico City. While Austin was away, the delegates called another meeting on April 1st, 1833. They elected Sergeant William Wharton to lead the meetings. The delegates led the meetings adopted the same proposals as they had in earlier convention, except this time.
As you can see, Spencer is very boring. He doesn't know what he's talking about, so go on, Spencer.
How many punches in my face? We're doing a fake fight. After a shoot fight, the Mexican retreated with one assault castle. What is that? The battle flag used by the Texans at the Battle of Gonzales gained considerable recognition as the "Come and Take the Flag." On a white banner was a picture of the old cannon painted in black. The flag acquired its name from the words "Come and Take It," painted below the cannon.
1. At first, Houston troops, about 800, outnumbered Santa Ana Army. During the night, Santa Ana received over 1,300 soldiers of reinforcements. Houston offered this to Smith-Burn-Vince Bridge, which would prevent the Mexicans from retreating. Mexican soldiers retreated expecting the battle the next morning, but Houston arranged men on the field.
They struck the right side of the Mexican army, pushing the troops back into each other all around the line. The Texans shouted, "Remember the Alamo, the Goliad," as they crossed the battleground. Mexican leaders scrambled in confusion. The battle lasted about 18 minutes, but the Texans continued to capture the Mexican troops until dark. 2 Texans died, 30 wounded. 630 Mexicans died, and 730 captured. Santa Ana escaped and hid in a barn. He got captured the next day and brought to Houston, who had been wounded in the fight.
People traveled to Texas adventuring future land grants. Many had not taken the oaths as Mexican citizens. They expected to get sent back to the U.S. Some of often through their lives would be spared because they surrendered. Santa Ana offered all captives to be shot. Guards began shooting all but a throwful who escaped. The rest of the men, including Ferdinand, were executed later.
2, 3.
I'm Gibbe, and I want to talk to you about the Convention of 1836. 54 delegates of the Convention of 1836 began meeting on March 1st at the village of Washington on the Brazos. Each of the settlements of Texas were represented by delegates elected 1 month earlier. Richard Ellis was elected president of the convention of Herbert S. Kimball, secretary.
With very little time to accomplish its mission, delegates of the Convention of 1836 wrote and adopted the Texas Declaration of Independence, prepared a constitution for the newly formed republic, and organized an intern government. These actions were accomplished amid an almost daily report for the invasion of Texas soil by Mexico, and the collapse of the Alamo and destruction of its defenders. With their mission accomplished, the delegates in the newly formed government of the Republic of Texas adjourned in haste during the early morning House on March 17th, following the news of the approach of Santa Ana and the Mexican army.
Conflict, the Mexican authorities sent a force of about 100 men to repossess the cannon that had been provided to residents of Gonzales for defense against Indians. In response to the Mexican force, the Texans under Colonels John H. Moore and J.W.E. Wallace loaded the cannon with sawed-up iron, aimed at the Mexicans, and fired the shot that began the revolution.
The Alamo served as a home to missionaries their Indians convert for nearly 70 years. San Antonio and the Alamo played a critical role in the Texas Revolution. In December 1835, Ben Milam led Texan and Tejano volunteers against Mexican troops quartered into the city. After 5 days of the house-to-house fighting, they forced General Martin Perfecto Cos and his soldiers to surrender. On February 23, 1836, the arrival of General Antonio Lopez D's Santa Ana armies outside San Antonio nearly caught them by surprise. The defenders, Texans and Tejanos, held out for 13 days against Santa Ana's army. Colonel Travis drew a line on the ground and asked any man willing to stay and fight to step over. All except one did. The final assault came daybreak on the morning of March 6, 1836. As Columns of Mexican soldiers emerged from the darkness and headed for the Alamos walls.
The sledge from San Antonio dragged on, and the Texans' army began to drift away. Many of the men were farmers or ranchers who had work to do at home. Texans humiliated themselves at what became known as the grass fight. One of the Texas book looked at showed that Mexican soldiers were bringing miles and horses to San Antonio. The Texans suspected the miles were carrying silver, caused madness to give to his soldier who paid them.
However, when the Texans attacked, they discovered that the mules were carrying only grass to feed the Mexicans' hungry horses. Texans were about to give up when they heard encouraging news that Custer's troops were in great confusion and low on supplies. 300 of the 500 men were ready to fight, and on December 5th they launched their attack. As many people were killed and wounded in the fight, raged on for 5 days.
1.
The fighting finally stopped when Coss hosted a white flag of surrender. The Mexican general agreed to give the Texans all money, supplies, arms, and property held by the Mexicans in San Antonio. He also pledged to never again oppose the Constitution of 1824. In exchange, Coss was permitted to lead his surviving soldiers out of Texas. He immediately began gathering an army south of the Rio Grande to deal with the Texas revolutions.